He only brought 2 kids and an empty wallet to the date, but what she did next changed his heart forever. The sky over Asheville was the color of worn denim, soft and drowsy with the last light of day. Along a quiet stretch of Montford Avenue, tucked between a florist and a used bookstore, a family-owned Italian restaurant named Trattoria Elena flickered to life with its golden window lights and the clinking sound of silverware against porcelain. It smelled of warm bread and basil, of dinners that didn't rush, of stories that belonged to grandparents and toddlers alike. Lucas Bennett stood just outside the front door, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He wore jeans faded from time, not fashion, and a navy blue flannel shirt buttoned unevenly over a white tee. On his right shoulder hung a diaper bag, though it technically no longer carried diapers. His twin girls had outgrown them. It now housed snacks, wipes, and 2 well-worn plush rabbits named Dottie and Captain Chew. One twin, Ella, clung to his left hand, her curls sticking out from beneath a headband with a crooked felt flower. The other, Emma, refused to hold anyone's hand. She was too busy dragging a book on the pavement, the corner already fraying. "Do we have to eat inside?" Emma asked, scrunching her nose. "Yes, baby," Lucas answered gently, glancing at the restaurant's door. "It's just spaghetti. You love spaghetti." "I love it at home," Ella muttered. "With socks on." Lucas almost laughed. Almost. But inside, he was barely holding it together. This wasn't just dinner. It was an experiment. A test, if he was honest. It had been 3 years since Caroline died. 3 years of bedtime routines and therapy appointments, of spilled juice and single-parent guilt. And tonight, he'd let a friend convince him to try something radical. Dating again. Of course, that plan derailed before it even began. The woman from the app, Renee, Rachel, had canceled 20 minutes earlier with a clipped text. "Sorry, not looking for a man with baggage or booster seats." Lucas didn't blame her, but he hated that the twins had heard the disappointment in his voice as he muttered, "Never mind, girls. Change of plans." Still, they were already dressed, already excited. So he brought them here, pretending it was just another dinner out. The hostess greeted them with a smile that faltered only slightly when she spotted the children. "Reservation?" she asked. Lucas hesitated. "It's under Bennett, but we don't really need—" Before he could finish, the front door opened behind them. Sorry, I'm late," came a voice, breathless and warm. Lucas turned. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'4". She wore a linen skirt, a cardigan with frayed sleeves, and shoes with one toe scuffed white. A canvas tote was slung over her shoulder, books peeking out of the top. Her hair was honey blonde and fell in loose waves, partly caught in the strap of her bag. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, or the hurry, or both. "I'm Sadie," she said, her smile tentative. "From, Midtown Connections? The dating app?" Lucas opened his mouth, startled. This wasn't who he was supposed to meet, but she was already stepping forward. "You said table by the window and, well..." She gestured to the 2 girls who stared up at her, curious and unblinking. "This seemed like the only table that fit the description." The hostess blinked. Lucas blinked. Emma whispered, "I like her shoes." Lucas didn't correct her. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the exhaustion behind her smile, the kind he recognized in the mirror, or the softness in her eyes that didn't flinch at the sight of kids. Maybe it was because, for the first time since Caroline's death, he didn't feel invisible or studied. He felt seen. "We just got here," he said instead. "Come sit." Sadie hesitated only a moment before sliding into the seat across from him. The twins flanked her like sentinels, leaning over the table to inspect her bag. "What's in there?" Ella asked. "Books," Sadie answered. "Lots and lots of books. Want to see?" She pulled out a children's paperback with a raccoon on the cover and set it on the table. Emma's eyes lit up. "That's the one with the messy kitchen." "You've read it?" Sadie said, delighted. "4 times," Ella said. "We like raccoons." And just like that, the girls were hooked. They pelted her with questions about favorite animals, library cards, and if she could draw. She could, kind of. She grabbed a napkin and started doodling a cat, lopsided and goofy. Lucas sat back in stunned silence, watching it all unfold like a dream. There was no awkwardness, no explanations, no tests or small talk about careers, just laughter and crayons and marinara sauce smeared across the napkin art. When the spaghetti arrived, along with juice boxes and a small mountain of napkins, it was chaos. Good chaos. Orange juice toppled. Someone sneezed into the breadsticks. Emma got sauce in her eyebrows. Sadie didn't flinch. She leaned over and helped Emma clean up. She shared a story about slipping face first into a birthday cake at a library party once. The twins roared with laughter. Lucas tried to breathe. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not tonight. Not ever, maybe. He reached for his back pocket when the bill arrived, and froze. His wallet wasn't there. His mind scrambled. These weren't his usual jeans. No assistant, no driver. He'd left everything behind tonight to feel normal, and now he looked, what? Reckless? Irresponsible? Pathetic. But Sadie had already noticed. Before he could explain, she reached into her worn leather wallet and handed the server her card. "It's okay," she said gently, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I've had worse dinner dates." Lucas stared at her, speechless. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, meeting his gaze. "But it looked like you needed someone to be kind. Just kind." And that, more than the drawing, the jokes, the book about raccoons, shattered something in him. Lucas had built empires. He'd negotiated acquisitions worth more than this entire block. But right now, he felt smaller than he had in years. Not because of shame, but because of how much it meant to be seen as a person, not a profile. A dad fumbling through dinner, not a tycoon hiding behind headlines. As dessert came, ice cream with rainbow sprinkles, the girls leaned against Sadie's shoulders, giggling at her stories. The warmth between them radiated like a quiet fire, steady and soft. When it was time to leave, Sadie stood and smoothed her skirt. Lucas hesitated. "Can I walk you to your car?" "No car," she said with a small shrug. "I took the bus." "I could give you a ride," he offered, almost shy. Sadie smiled, shook her head. "It's okay. I like walking. Helps me think." She bent down, kissed Ella on the forehead. "Thanks for letting me draw cats with you," she whispered. Emma grabbed her hand. "Come draw again?" "Maybe," she said softly, then looked at Lucas. "Nice meeting you?" "Lucas," he said. She nodded, then turned and stepped into the night, her tote swinging gently at her side. He watched her go until she disappeared around the corner. He wanted to chase after her. He didn't. Instead, he lifted Emma into one arm and took Ella's hand. They walked out into the cool night together, just the three of them. Inside his car, a napkin drawing fluttered to the floor. Lopsided cat, giant eyes, crooked whiskers. And in a child's handwriting, 3 names: Sadie, Ella, Emma. Lucas picked it up and held it to his chest for a long time before folding it carefully into his coat pocket. He didn't know who Sadie Quinn really was, but tonight she'd become something he hadn't realized he was missing, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel so alone. The next morning, Lucas found the crayon drawing folded between the pages of a financial report. It must have slipped in there last night when he was juggling the twins' jackets and the restaurant leftovers. A cat, lopsided and charming, grinned with too many whiskers. In purple marker, Ella had scribbled, "This is Sadie's cat." Underneath, Emma had written, "She's nice, like Grandma." The page smelled faintly of marinara sauce and melted crayon wax. Lucas stared at it for a long moment, then closed the report and leaned back in his chair. In the glass wall of his office, he could see the skyline of Asheville stretching beneath pale January clouds. The corner suite he worked from, ornate, high-ceilinged, polished, felt colder than usual. He had meetings to attend, numbers to review, and board decisions to finalize, but something inside him still lingered at that table by the window. The place where a woman with frizzy hair, too many books, and no makeup had laughed with his daughters like they belonged to her. She didn't ask what he did. She didn't flinch when Emma knocked over juice or when Ella tried to feed her noodles from a spoon. She didn't even ask for his number. She just smiled and walked away, like a person content to leave the moment intact and untouched, and that made it all the more unbearable. "Sir?" His assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Your 10 a.m. is waiting in the conference room." Lucas exhaled. "Give me 5 minutes." He reached into the drawer, slipped the napkin drawing into a folder labeled personal, and stood up. Not everything had to be explained. Some things were meant to be kept, like secrets children shared in whispers. That afternoon, Ella came home from preschool with a drawing of a jellyfish and a note pinned to her coat. It read, "Ella wouldn't stop talking about Sadie. She said Sadie has a library made of cats." Lucas smiled, confused but not surprised. At dinner, Emma interrupted their grilled cheese routine. "Are we going to see Miss Sadie again?" Lucas hesitated. "I'm not sure." "Why?" "She makes spaghetti better than you," Emma said frankly. Lucas lifted his eyebrows. "She didn't cook it. The restaurant did." "But she made it fun," Ella added, "even when my sleeve got wet with juice." Lucas's voice softened. "You liked her, huh?" Both girls nodded in unison. "She listened," Ella whispered. It pierced him. How long had it been since someone really listened to the twins? Most people smiled at them, patted their heads, and moved on. Sadie didn't rush. She drew cats and read labels upside down and treated their chaos like conversation. Lucas tucked that away, the way he did now with all good things, quietly, reverently, like a man storing summer in a glass jar for winter. 3 days later, a surprise came. Lucas was in the garage, helping the girls into their coats, when Emma declared, "We're going back to that restaurant." Lucas froze. "We are?" Ella nodded. "I left Dottie there." Dottie, her beloved stuffed rabbit with the tattered ear and missing eye. Lucas searched the entire car, then the entryway, the toy bin, the shoe rack. Nothing. He didn't want to admit it, but the excuse delighted him. He called the restaurant. "Hi, I think my daughter left a stuffed bunny there?" The hostess responded warmly. "Oh, yes, it's been waiting by the register. We were hoping someone would come back. It's been guarding our tip jar." Lucas grinned. "We'll be right there." They arrived at Trattoria Elena just before the lunch crowd. The windows still held condensation from boiling pots inside, and a sleepy hush hung over the tables. The hostess handed Dottie over like a sacred object. As Lucas thanked her, his gaze drifted toward the back table, their table. It was empty. And then he saw the book. Sitting in the corner, forgotten or maybe left intentionally, was a paperback. The House of 40 Cats. He picked it up slowly. A name was scrawled on the inside cover in blue ink. Sadie Quinn, with a tiny paw print doodle beside it. "She left this," the hostess said. "I think she's one of the regulars. Sometimes reads here when it's quiet." Lucas held the book a moment longer than necessary. "Do you know where she works?" he asked, voice casual. The hostess smiled. "Library on Pine Street. You can't miss it. Big red doors. Smells like old paper and cinnamon." Lucas didn't go that day. He waited. He wasn't sure why. Maybe pride. Maybe fear. But the image of the red doors haunted him. It wasn't until Friday, after a board meeting left him raw and a news article about his net worth trended again, that he found himself parking across from the library. He didn't tell the girls where they were going, just asked them to bring their favorite book. They obeyed without question, sleepy from school and content to be bundled in matching scarves. As they crossed the street, the girls clutched his hands, their fingers small but firm. The red doors were chipped at the corners, but bright, honest. Inside, the air changed. It was quiet, not in a hollow way, but in a full, sacred way. The kind of quiet that hugs your shoulders and says, "You can breathe here." Lucas heard laughter, then a voice, warm, lilting, theatrical. And then the bear said, "Who took my hat?" The girls gasped in unison. "It's her!" Ella squealed. Before he could stop them, they ran ahead. Sadie was seated on a low stool in the children's corner, a circle of kids around her. She looked up at the commotion, eyes widening. When she met Lucas's gaze, the book fell slightly in her lap. He raised a hand in a hesitant wave. She closed the book gently. "5-minute break, little ones." The children groaned. The girls didn't wait. They barreled into her arms like magnets to a compass. Lucas watched in silence. When Sadie finally stood, brushing crayon off her skirt, she walked toward him slowly. "You found me," she said. "I remembered the red doors." Silence hung between them, not cold, but cautious. Ella stepped forward, holding out another drawing. "It's you and us," she said. "With pizza this time." Sadie took it carefully, like it might tear. "Thank you, sweetie." She looked at Lucas. "You weren't who I was supposed to meet that night." "I know. You didn't say anything." "I was going to. But then," he exhaled. "Then you started drawing cats, and I didn't want it to stop." Sadie didn't laugh. She just looked at him. "I'm not a CEO when I'm with them," he said. "Just a dad with mismatched socks and jelly on his cuff. And you saw that. You didn't ask questions. You just let it be." Sadie blinked. "Maybe I didn't want to know the rest." "Why?" "Because the rest complicates things. And for once, I liked simple." Lucas looked down. Ella and Emma were sitting on the floor again, already flipping through books beside Sadie's forgotten tote. He cleared his throat. "I'm not here to complicate. I'm here because they missed you." Sadie's voice dropped. "And you?" "I couldn't stop thinking about the way you wiped Emma's chin like she was yours." She swallowed. A child nearby sneezed. Someone laughed across the room. And still they stood there, in a stillness between things. Lucas took a step forward. I don't know where this goes, but I didn't want to let it go without at least saying, "Thank you." Sadie looked at the girls, then at the crayon drawing, then back at him. "Thank you," she whispered. And in that moment something shifted. Not romance, not certainty, but something truer. Two people choosing to be seen without pretense. The red doors were closed when Lucas returned the next morning, and yet somehow the place still radiated warmth. He hadn't planned to come back so soon. After all, their visit yesterday ended with no promises, no phone numbers exchanged, no invitations extended, just a look. A long, unspoken moment where Sadie seemed to say, "I see you, but I'm not sure yet." And Lucas respected that. But respect didn't mean indifference. He stood on the sidewalk across from the library with 2 cups of coffee in his hands. One black, the way he always took it. The other with oat milk and cinnamon, based solely on a vague memory of Sadie mentioning her weird milk obsession during dinner with the twins. It wasn't much, but it was something. Behind him, the January wind pushed down the street like a whisper that never ended. He stared at the doors for 10 more seconds, then turned to leave. "Lucas?" The voice startled him. He turned and saw her there, Sadie Quinn, emerging from the side of the building with a canvas bag over one shoulder and her cardigan sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Her hair was pinned back loosely, like it had only just been tamed after wrestling with the wind. She looked surprised. Not upset, just surprised. He held out the coffee. "You mentioned cinnamon." Sadie blinked, then laughed softly. "You remembered?" "I remember strange things," he said, sheepish. "Numbers, names, types of milk." She took the cup from his hand. "Oat milk and cinnamon. You did it." "I did." There was a pause. Then, without another word, Sadie gestured to the side steps of the building. "Come on. Library opens in 15. We've got benches and decent pigeons." They sat side by side on the cold stone bench beneath a skeletal dogwood tree. Birds fluttered nearby, picking at seeds someone had scattered earlier that morning. Around them, the city was slowly waking up. Sadie took a sip of the coffee and hummed in approval. "This is good." Lucas nodded, watching her. "You like working here?" "I love it," she replied instantly. "It's small and dusty and probably doesn't meet half the funding standards it should, but it feels human." He smiled. "That's a rare thing in a public institution." "Oh, I know, but here the kids don't care if the carpet is from 1998. They just want to be seen, heard, held together by words." She looked down into her cup. "Yesterday meant a lot," she said finally. "Seeing the girls, seeing you." "I wasn't sure if I should come back," Lucas admitted. Sadie raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because it was good. And I'm not used to good staying." Silence again, but the kind that didn't ache. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said. Sadie's eyes softened. "I'm so sorry." She was the anchor, the planner. I was the builder, she was the gardener. I kept the business alive, she kept us alive. He chuckled, but the sound broke at the edges. "When she died, I didn't know how to boil pasta without setting off the smoke alarm. Now I can make dinosaur-shaped mac and cheese with one hand and fix a booster seat with the other." Sadie smiled gently. "That's a pretty remarkable evolution. The girls, they're the reason I didn't disappear." She said nothing, just sipped her coffee and waited. Lucas felt no pressure to fill the silence, only room to breathe. "And you?" he asked. "Your story?" Sadie blew into her cup. "I don't have a tragic love story, if that's what you're bracing for. Just a long history of starting over." He tilted his head. "My mom raised me on her own," she said. "We moved a lot. She worked nights, cleaning offices, driving delivery routes. But she always read to me before bed, even if it was just for 10 minutes and she was half asleep." She looked toward the library. "Books were my constants. They made places feel familiar, safe. I figured if I worked around stories long enough, I'd feel like I belonged somewhere." Lucas watched her. "Do you?" "Sometimes," she said softly. "Especially with kids. Especially when they let me into their worlds, even for a minute." He thought about the way Ella had crawled into Sadie's lap with no hesitation. The way Emma had offered her crayon like it was a treasure. Kids didn't fake trust. "I've never seen them take to someone that fast," he said. "I didn't do anything special." "You didn't have to." Their eyes met, and in that stillness, something settled. Not romance, not certainty, but a question neither of them dared to ask. Later that week, Lucas returned, with the girls this time. It wasn't planned. Ella had asked if Miss Sadie still lived behind the red door. Emma wanted to show her a new drawing. Lucas gave in faster than he meant to. Inside the children's wing of the library, the girls scattered like marbles, pulling books from shelves, dragging beanbags into corners, building forts from cushions and blankets. Sadie greeted them like old friends, not visitors. She knelt down, accepted their drawings, asked them questions about school and pets and what kind of cereal made the best tower base. She didn't treat them like fragile porcelain. She treated them like architects of wonder. Lucas stayed near the window watching the scene unfold. It was quiet chaos, joyful, honest. Sadie knelt beside Emma, helping her spell giraffe for a label on her book cover. Ella climbed into her lap mid-sentence. Sadie didn't miss a beat. Lucas's heart ached, but not from grief this time. From recognition. This was something he didn't know how to name yet. Not love, not hope. Something older. Something deeper. Belonging. When they left, Emma tugged at Sadie's sleeve. "Will you come eat spaghetti again?" Sadie looked to Lucas, then back to the girls. "I'd love to," she said, her voice warm. "But only if your dad doesn't set the kitchen on fire." Lucas held up his hands. "I've improved." "We'll be the judge of that," Sadie teased. And just like that, a plan was made. Friday. Spaghetti. No restaurant. Just the cottage by the lake, his mother's old place. The one with the chimes and chipped plates and family photos still on the shelves. As they walked to the car, Ella slipped her hand into his. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "I think Miss Sadie is a good person." Lucas swallowed the lump in his throat. "Yeah, baby. I think so too." The lake house didn't look like much. To someone passing by, it was just an aging, single-story cottage tucked behind a row of pines on the outskirts of Asheville. The shutters were crooked. The driveway gravel was scattered with leaves. The front porch sagged ever so slightly, and the old wind chime above the door had lost 2 of its bells. But to Lucas Bennett, it was everything that still felt real. His mother had bought it when he was 10. Back when things were still held together by casseroles, church on Sundays, and the occasional roof leak. After she passed, he couldn't bring himself to sell it. It was where Caroline had first brought the girls as newborns. where they learned to walk across its creaky wooden floors, where the sound of wind through the trees had once lulled them to sleep during summer storms. It was, in every sense, home. And tonight, for the first time in years, it would hold more than just memories. Lucas stood in the small kitchen, stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce with nervous determination. His apron, faded blue and fraying at the straps, declared boldly in peeling letters, "Kiss the cook." He hadn't worn it since before Caroline died. Emma was in the living room arranging crayons by shade on the coffee table, a ritual she insisted helped balance the room. Ella sat beside her, carefully taping up their latest masterpiece on the wall, a crayon portrait of Sadie, smiling with a book in one hand and spaghetti in the other. "You think she'll like it?" Ella asked, stepping back to admire their work. Emma nodded confidently. "She likes us. So yes." Lucas wiped his hands and glanced at the clock. 5:47 p.m. The knock came at 5:49. He opened the door, heart already trying to outrun his breath. Sadie stood there in the early twilight, cheeks kissed pink by the cold, a bottle of sparkling apple cider in one hand and a pie tin in the other. "I didn't know what to bring," she said, sheepish, "so I brought what I could afford. Apple cider and a barely holding itself together pie." Lucas smiled. "That's 2 more things than we had." Behind him, the girls squealed. "Miss Sadie!" Sadie stepped inside and knelt immediately, arms open. "You made art!" "We made you," Emma declared, pointing to the wall. Sadie stared at the drawing, then at the 2 small humans beaming beside it. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I've never looked better." She set the pie down, stood slowly, and met Lucas's eyes. "It smells like memory in here." "That's probably the oregano," he joked. They laughed, awkwardly at first, then easier, more honest. Dinner was chaos in a way only young children and nervous adults could create. The spaghetti boiled over. The bread burned just enough to be tragic. Ella dropped her fork 3 times and blamed gravity. Emma insisted on telling a story about a pigeon with a limp who wanted to be a doctor. Sadie listened to every word like it was gospel. Lucas couldn't stop watching her. Not in the way a man watches a woman he's attracted to, though that truth sat quietly beneath the surface, but in the way a man watches a miracle he never expected to witness. She sat there, wearing a cardigan with a small hole near the sleeve, laughing when the girls smeared sauce on her napkin, helping cut their garlic bread into perfect squares without ever making them feel incapable. There was no performance in her, no flattery, no flirtation, no agenda. She simply was. And the house, long, quiet, and hollow, responded in kind. After dinner, the girls demanded a story. Sadie led them into the living room, where a basket of old picture books still sat beside the fireplace. She pulled out a tattered copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, settled into the armchair, and opened the book. The girls curled up at her feet, eyes wide, shoulders touching. Lucas leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, breath caught. Her voice was soft, steady, not theatrical like a librarian performing a show, but gentle, intimate, like each sentence was a thread stitching something back together. "Real isn't how you are made," she read. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time." The fire crackled. The twins' heads slowly tilted. Their eyes fluttered. By the end of the story, both were asleep on the rug, arms entwined like vines. Sadie closed the book slowly. Lucas didn't move. For a long time, the only sound was the wind chime outside and the distant murmur of the lake lapping against the shore. "I've never seen them fall asleep like that," Lucas said quietly. Sadie looked at him. "They feel safe here. With you." She shook her head. "It's this house. The drawings. The sauce stains. You." He walked over and sat on the edge of the rug, careful not to wake the girls. "I was terrified to invite you here." "Why?" "Because this is where I loved Caroline, and where I lost her." Sadie didn't reply. He ran a hand through his hair. "I thought if I brought someone here, it would mean I was letting go of that. Of her." She looked down at the girls. "And does it?" He swallowed. "No. It means maybe I'm letting love in, instead of just clinging to what left." Sadie's voice was barely audible. "That's not betrayal." Lucas looked at her. "You sure?" She met his eyes. "I think she'd be proud. That her girls laugh again. That their dad still knows how to make bad garlic bread." He smiled. She added softly, "That he let someone help." He reached out, brushing a curl away from Ella's forehead, then Emma's. The girls stirred but didn't wake. "I don't know what this is," he admitted, "or where it's going." Sadie didn't answer. She just leaned back in the armchair and whispered, "Me neither, but I'm not afraid of it." Later, after the girls were carried to bed and the dishes were done, they stepped out onto the porch. It was a mild winter night. The wind was quiet. The sky was clear. Sadie stood at the railing, her arms wrapped around herself. Lucas handed her a blanket from inside. "Here." She draped it around her shoulders. "Thank you." He sat beside her on the wooden swing, the same one where he and Caroline used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings. But tonight, it didn't feel haunted. It felt peaceful. "I don't live in a big house," Sadie said suddenly. "I rent a small apartment above a used bookstore. My furniture's second-hand. I've got 3 mugs that match." Lucas smiled. "I wear an apron with peeling letters and forgot how to use a wine opener last year." She turned to him. "I don't have much to offer, Lucas. You just made 2 kids feel like the world was soft again." He paused. "You made me feel like the world was soft again." Sadie looked away, eyes glossy. He didn't touch her, didn't lean in. He just sat beside her, letting the silence be full instead of fearful. And when she finally spoke, her voice broke the dark gently. "I thought I'd always be the visitor, the one who reads the story, then leaves before the last page." Lucas reached for her hand. "Maybe it's time someone wrote you into the story." Sadie didn't speak again, but she didn't let go either. The photo appeared quietly, grainy, out of focus, and taken through the branches of a maple tree that stood outside the Pine Street Library. It showed Sadie Quinn, her cardigan sleeves rolled up as usual, holding hands with Ella and Emma. The girls were mid-laugh, leaping off the library steps as if flying. Sadie's head was tilted toward them, smiling wide, hair dancing in the winter wind. The caption underneath read, "Mystery woman spotted with Bennett twins. Who is she?" No one asked permission. No one warned them. Within 12 hours, her name was trending. Within 24, it was being dissected. Across forums, podcasts, social media threads. Speculation turned her into a story she never asked to be part of. Was she the nanny? The new girlfriend? The secret widow of some tech rival? By the time Lucas found out, the storm had already landed. He had just finished breakfast with the girls. Pancakes, messy syrup, laughter echoing through the old lake house, when his phone lit up with calls from his PR team, his general counsel, and one particularly persistent board member. They all said the same thing. You need to control this narrative before it controls you. Lucas didn't reply. Instead, he stepped out onto the porch, phone in hand, heart cold and heavy. Because this time the spotlight wasn't on him. It was on her. And she hadn't signed up for any of it. Sadie opened her apartment door to a wall of flashes, cameras, microphones, strangers calling her name like they knew it. She blinked against the blur, shielding her face with a tote bag. "Please, please leave," she said, voice shaking. A reporter thrust forward. "Sadie, are you dating Lucas Bennett?" Another, "Are you moving in with him?" And then, cruelly, someone muttered, "Or are you just the help?" Her stomach twisted. She turned, ran back inside, and locked the door behind her, breathing hard against the wood. The hallway outside buzzed with noise, like hornets against a screen. Upstairs, her neighbor's baby started crying. Downstairs, a voice yelled, "We've got a librarian scandal now? What's next? A barista prince?" Sadie slid to the floor, fingers trembling. She had never felt so exposed, so reduced. She hadn't done anything wrong, and yet somehow she'd become a headline. It didn't stop there. The library called the next morning. She was asked to come in early. When she arrived, the director, a gentleman named Pete who'd hired her 5 years ago, sat behind his desk with both hands folded, eyes full of apology. "There's been pressure," he said softly, "from donors, from the city council." Sadie swallowed hard. "Because of the photo?" "Because of the noise around it," he said. "They're saying it's a distraction, that your presence is attracting too much attention." "My presence," she whispered. He winced. "I'm so sorry, Sadie. I fought for you." She blinked. "Am I being fired?" "No. Technically, no." He hesitated. "But we need to place you on administrative leave until things quiet down." Sadie nodded. Once. Then stood. "Thanks for telling me." She packed her desk that afternoon. By evening, her name was being linked in gossip columns to CEOs she'd never met. Conspiracy theories bloomed like mold in comment sections. Her inbox flooded with interview requests. And beneath it all, the silence from Lucas stretched unbearably loud. He hadn't called. Not once. But the truth was, Lucas had tried. He called her 3 times, left messages that started with, "Sadie, I didn't know," and ended with silence. Texted once, "I'm here. I'm sorry. Please talk to me." But he didn't come to her door. He didn't show up. And that was what hurt the most. Sadie waited 4 days. She didn't eat much, didn't sleep well. She thought about Ella's laugh, about the drawing on her fridge, about the way Emma once leaned into her side mid-story and whispered, "You smell like books. I like that." And now they were gone. Because she wasn't famous enough or wealthy enough or small enough to slip past the noise. She sat on her couch late one night, hands clutching a box of library bookmarks she never got to give away, and finally cried in a way she hadn't since her mother died. Lucas stood in the middle of his office, surrounded by windows and nothing else. The lake house was too quiet now. The girls noticed. "Is Miss Sadie sick?" Ella had asked 2 nights ago. Emma, more direct, had asked, "Did she stop liking us?" He hadn't answered either question. He didn't know how. Now, staring at his own reflection in the window, he knew this was on him. He'd wanted to protect her by staying quiet. But silence had never protected anyone. It only left them to fight alone. He grabbed his coat, his keys, and left the building without telling a soul. The crowd outside her apartment had thinned, but the cameras still watched. Lucas pulled up 2 blocks away. He carried nothing but a worn drawing, Emma's last crayon sketch, with 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. Over the top, in crooked letters, "We miss you, Miss Sadie." He walked the final stretch with measured steps, his heart in his throat. When he reached her stoop, he looked up. She was watching from the 2nd-story window. He raised his voice just enough to carry above the low hum of reporters. "I can't change the world, Sadie," he said, "but I can stand between you and it." A camera clicked. He didn't flinch. "I can take the headlines, the noise, the spin, but I will not let this storm take you from the girls, or from me. Just say the word." Silence. Then her voice, faint through the window. "You have to protect them, Lucas, your daughters. Don't let them get caught in this mess." "They already are," he said. "They ask about you every night. They draw pictures. They wait by the window." Another pause. Then, "I didn't ask for this." "I know," he said. "Neither did I. But somehow, it's the most real thing I've had in years." He waited. A minute passed, then 2. Her voice came again, small and broken. "I'm sorry, but I need you to go." He stood still for a breath, then nodded. He folded the drawing gently and placed it at her doorstep. And then he walked away. Sadie didn't move for a long time. The hallway outside was quiet. No cameras, no voices, only the crinkle of paper when she finally opened the door. She picked up the drawing, held it to her chest, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself believe that maybe this wasn't the end. Just the middle. The drawing stayed on her door for 3 days. Taped just above the peephole, its uneven corners curled from the chill. Every time Sadie Quinn left her apartment, for groceries, for breath, for anything resembling motion, her fingers brushed its edge. "We miss you, Miss Sadie," it read, written in crayon by a 5-year-old's hopeful hand. A purple stick figure stood between 2 smaller ones, all 3 smiling beneath a rainbow. At the bottom, Emma's handprint bloomed in orange beside Ella's green heart. It was the only thing that made her pause in the threshold, pause before facing the cameras still parked at the far end of the street, or the whispers from neighbors who once smiled but now avoided eye contact. She had shut the world out, but this she couldn't shut out. Sadie didn't sleep well. Not since the leave from the library. Not since Lucas's voice trembled outside her window. Not since she'd whispered for him to go. Each night she pulled a blanket onto the couch and pretended the quiet didn't ache. Each morning she made tea she never finished. She told herself she was protecting them by staying away, but every time she walked past that drawing, she wasn't sure who she was protecting anymore. Inside the lake house, silence had returned like fog rolling in after a fire. Lucas noticed it in the way the girls stopped arguing over crayons, how their bedtime stories became shorter, how their questions about Sadie turned into statements whispered under blankets. She probably forgot us, Emma said one night. She didn't, Lucas replied. Then why isn't she here? Ella asked, voice barely audible. He didn't have an answer. He only knew the ache was real and spreading, first through him, now through them. The next morning, Lucas found the girls at the kitchen table, unusually quiet. A pile of construction paper, crayons, glue sticks, and glitter had consumed the space. Ella held up a new drawing, 3 stick figures again. This time, the hearts around them were bigger, dozens of them in every color. Above the rainbow, in careful block letters, it read, "We bring our hearts." Lucas felt something crack inside him. "We're going to see her," he said. Emma looked up, eyes wide. "For real?" He nodded. "No reporters, no cameras, just us." They dressed in their warmest clothes. No one spoke much. Lucas parked 2 blocks away, just like before. The sidewalks were quiet. Most of the media attention had shifted to another scandal in another city. The world was fickle like that. Cruel 1 minute, forgetful the next. He carried Emma in one arm and held Ella's hand with the other, the folded drawing tucked carefully into his coat. When they reached the apartment, the original drawing was still there, faded slightly, but holding on. Lucas knocked once, then twice. No answer. He glanced down at the girls. "Are you ready?" Ella nodded. Emma reached up, and together they taped the new drawing underneath the old one. Then, without prompting, the girls stood side by side in front of the door, arms stretched wide, tiny faces open, waiting for something they didn't have words for. Behind the door, Sadie sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacks of books she'd tried reorganizing to quiet her mind. She had heard the knock, heard the soft giggles, heard the hush. And then, she heard nothing but hope. Slowly, she stood. Her heart thundered in her chest. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Ella and Emma, bundled in coats and scarves, arms outstretched, looked up at her with shining eyes. "Hi," Emma whispered. Sadie dropped to her knees. Tears spilled faster than she could stop them. "I missed you," she choked out. The girls ran into her arms, their small bodies pressed tight against hers. Ella clutched her coat. Emma buried her face in Sadie's shoulder. Behind them, Lucas stood silently, his hands deep in his coat pockets, eyes rimmed red. Sadie looked up, still holding the girls. "I didn't come with headlines," he said. "I didn't come with promises. Just this, my heart and theirs." She swallowed, lips trembling. "Why did you really come?" He exhaled. "Because I can live without money, without power, without quiet weekends or clean shirts. But I can't live without this. Without you." The girls squeezed her tighter. Sadie looked at them, then at him. "I thought I was protecting you by staying away." Lucas stepped closer. "You were trying. But that's not protection. That's pain." She stood slowly, arms still around the girls. And this time she didn't block the doorway. "Then come in," she said. Lucas entered. The girls didn't let go of Sadie's hands, and for the first time in weeks, everything was still. Not silent, not uncertain, just still. Inside, the girls curled onto her couch like they'd never left. They showed her the new drawing, told her about the bird's nest they saw by the lake, and asked if she still had the book about the raccoon with the messy kitchen. Sadie wiped her eyes and smiled. "It's right here." They read together, limbs tangled, voices overlapping. Lucas watched from the kitchen, making tea. This time, Sadie finished hers. When the girls dozed off mid-story, he sat beside her on the floor. "They missed you like breath," he said. Sadie looked at him. "So did you." He nodded. She glanced at the drawings still hanging on the door. "I'm not sure I can handle that again. The noise, the fallout." "I won't let it happen again," he said. "You can't promise that." "No," Lucas agreed. "But I can promise this. Next time, you won't go through it alone." Sadie looked away. "I'm just a librarian, Lucas. I'm not built for your world." He shook his head. "Then maybe my world needs to look more like yours." She blinked. He added quietly, "I don't want you to change. I want you to stay. Exactly as you are." Later that evening, the four of them stood at the apartment door. Lucas held the girls' coats. Sadie held their hands. "I'm not ready to move back into your life like it never happened," she said honestly. "You don't have to," Lucas replied. "Just move forward, one day at a time, with us." Sadie knelt again, brushing the girls' curls back. "Can I come visit soon?" she asked. Ella looked puzzled. "Why not just stay now?" Sadie smiled softly. "Because sometimes people need to come back slowly. That way it lasts longer." Emma nodded. "Okay, but don't take too long." "I won't," she promised. Lucas opened his arms. Sadie stepped into them. It wasn't passionate or dramatic. It was grounding. Real. Two people finally saying, "We're not finished. And maybe we never were." That night, Lucas taped both drawings from Sadie's door onto the inside of the lake house pantry. The heart one was slightly wrinkled. The older one had faded at the corners, but together they told a story. A quiet love letter in crayon and courage, and it was only just beginning. The cottage waited. It had no voice, but if it did, it might have exhaled softly when Sadie stepped onto the porch that Sunday afternoon, a week after the storm had passed. The girls had begged her to come back just for spaghetti, but Lucas knew, they all knew. It wasn't just about dinner. This wasn't about a meal. It was about returning to a place that had once embraced her like she belonged. She stood at the edge of the porch, her fingers grazing the wooden railing as if reacquainting herself with an old friend. The wind chime above the door tinkled gently, as though it too remembered her. Lucas opened the door before she could knock. He didn't say anything. He just stepped back and let her in. Sadie crossed the threshold slowly. The scent hit her first. Rosemary, tomatoes, flour dusted on countertops. The kind of scent you couldn't fake. The kind built from time and trying and love. "Aprons on the hook," Lucas said behind her. "You're welcome to join the chaos." Sadie glanced toward the kitchen. Ella was rolling out lopsided dough for garlic knots. Emma stood on a step stool, stirring sauce with the focus of a scientist conducting an experiment. "I'm just the guest," Sadie said. "No such thing in this house," Emma replied, without turning. Sadie laughed and stepped inside fully. Dinner was beautifully imperfect. The garlic knots were burnt at the edges. The salad was mostly croutons and ranch dressing. The pasta stuck to the pot. But none of that mattered. The girls told Sadie about their week, how Emma had made a tower of juice boxes at school, how Ella had seen a hawk in the parking lot and almost talked to it. They asked her about her books, her neighbors, her favorite animal today, because apparently it was allowed to change. And Sadie? She just stayed. Not for minutes, not cautiously, but fully. She passed the bread, wiped sauce from tiny cheeks, and laughed until her stomach hurt. It was like she'd never left. Except now, she knew she'd been missed. After dinner, while Lucas loaded the dishwasher, Sadie sat on the floor with the girls, helping them cut paper hearts for an indoor tree they'd taped to the wall beside the bookshelf. "This one's for you," Ella said, handing her a pink heart that read, "Miss Sadie, Book Queen in marker." Sadie clutched it to her chest. "This might be the highest title I've ever earned." Emma crawled into her lap and whispered, "Can you read tonight?" Sadie paused, then nodded. "I'd love to." They climbed onto the couch, Sadie in the middle, the girls nestled under her arms. She chose a book with a bear who'd lost its scarf and set off through a snowy forest to find it. Halfway through, Lucas leaned in the doorway, drying his hands on a dish towel, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The girls were asleep before the last page. Sadie closed the book gently, her hands trembling slightly. Lucas approached, quiet as snowfall. "She made me the book queen," Sadie said with a half laugh, her voice thick. "She was right," he said. They sat in the hush, two grown people wrapped in the kind of quiet only earned after storms have passed. Later, after the girls were tucked into bed, Lucas handed Sadie a cup of tea and led her to the back porch. The stars were out. The lake was still. "I wanted to ask you something," he said as they sat down. She turned toward him, eyes wary but open. Lucas continued, "I know I've got a house with rooms I never go into. I've got offices in 3 cities. I've got suits I don't wear and flights I don't want to take." Sadie tilted her head. "That sounds exhausting." "It is," he said. "But this house, this cottage, it's the only place I feel like myself." He looked at her. "And when you're in it, I feel like we might be real." Sadie said nothing for a long time. Then she placed her mug down and answered in the softest whisper, "This house is stubborn." Lucas blinked. "Stubborn?" "It remembers everything," she said. "The baby pictures, the chimes, the sauce stains in the kitchen, the corner where the rug curls. It's not trying to be perfect. It's just trying to stay." She looked at him, her voice stronger now. "And somehow, in the middle of all that, it chose me. It let me in." Lucas reached for her hand. "I want you here," he said simply. "No deadlines, no conditions, just here." She leaned against him. "You're asking me to stay?" "I'm asking you not to leave alone again." The night wrapped around them like a blanket stitched from second chances. Over the next few weeks, Sadie didn't move in. Not exactly, but she came for dinner on Mondays and Wednesdays. And somehow, Fridays turned into game nights with board games, missing pieces, and hot chocolate spilled on the couch. On Sundays, she brought fresh bread from the bakery near the bookstore and stayed through bedtime. The girls began calling the spare bedroom Sadie's room. Sadie didn't correct them. She hung their drawings on the wall, put her toothbrush in the upstairs bathroom, and started leaving a book or two on the nightstand. Lucas said nothing when he noticed. He just smiled. Because she wasn't a guest anymore. She was home. One evening, after a particularly messy macaroni experiment and a spontaneous living room dance party, Lucas found her in the kitchen, tying Ella's shoelace while Emma chattered beside her. He stood in the doorway and just watched. The light from the stove hood lit her hair like a halo. She looked up, caught his gaze, and smiled. "What?" she asked. Lucas stepped forward, crouched beside her, and brushed a curl away from her face. "I don't know when it happened," he said quietly, "but one day this house started looking like ours." Sadie's eyes welled. "You're building something," she whispered, "and you didn't even know it." "I wasn't building," he said. "I was surviving." She touched his cheek. "Not anymore." That night, after the girls were asleep and the house was still, Lucas and Sadie sat on the porch swing. No confessions, no declarations, just a shared blanket and the sound of chimes dancing in the wind. "Do you think people like us, grief-worn, world-weary, deserve something gentle?" Sadie asked. Lucas looked at her, then up at the sky. "I think maybe gentleness is what we were meant for all along." And in that quiet place, between the lake and the stars, gentleness was enough. The idea came quietly. Like all good things, it began not with a grand declaration, but with a whisper, spoken in passing over coffee and toast, one rainy Thursday morning in the cottage kitchen. Sadie had just wiped peanut butter from Emma's nose when she said, almost absently, "When I was little, I used to wait at the library until closing time, just so I wouldn't have to go home." Lucas looked up from his mug. "You never told me that." Sadie shrugged, her eyes lingering on the girls who were coloring at the table. "The librarians never asked questions. They just let me stay. Sometimes they left the lights on a little longer." Lucas was quiet a moment, then asked, "What would have helped you back then?" She hesitated. Then, "A place that came to me. A story that found me first." Lucas leaned back in his chair, the gears already turning behind his eyes. And by the time dinner rolled around that night, he had a name written in his notebook. Story Nest. It started as an idea between two people and a crayon heart taped to a kitchen wall. But ideas, when they land on hearts ready to act, tend to grow wings. Lucas offered the seed money, not as a donation, but as a gesture of belief. Sadie, true to form, didn't want her name on anything. "It's not about me," she said. "It's about them." Together, they began building. The first step was a van. Not a sleek, modern camper, but a boxy, slightly beat-up Ford Transit with enough space for shelves and beanbags and books that had been read one too many times. Sadie painted it herself, with help from Ella and Emma, who insisted the bird logo wear reading glasses. On the side, in bold, childlike lettering, it read, "Story Nest, bringing books where they're needed most." The girls giggled as they dipped their fingers in paint to leave prints on the back door. "Now it's part ours forever," Emma declared. They visited shelters first, then low-income schools, food pantries, parks with rusted swings and sidewalks with more weeds than cracks. Each time the van pulled up, children gathered, curious at first, then captivated. Sadie didn't just read books, she brought them to life. She gave each child a name tag, remembered their favorite animal, let them borrow a story, and promised it would wait for them if they came back. And they did. Week after week. The children returned with stories of their own, drawn in crayon, scribbled on napkins, whispered in her ear when the world felt too big. Lucas stayed in the background most of the time, watching her from a quiet corner, helping where needed, handing out juice boxes and fixing jammed door latches. But every so often, he'd catch Sadie mid-story, her eyes alight, surrounded by children leaning in as if the world rested on her next word. In those moments, he saw a woman who hadn't just healed from her pain. She had transformed it. The press found them again. Only this time, it wasn't scandal they printed. It was inspiration. From librarian to literacy advocate, how one woman turned a van into a haven. CEO. Steps back, supports girlfriend's grassroots reading mission. Story Nest delivers hope, one book at a time. Lucas refused interviews. Instead, his PR team released a statement that read simply, "We believe in stories that build communities, and we believe in the people brave enough to tell them." At home, life settled into a rhythm so gentle it felt like breathing. Mornings started with cereal and sleepy hair. Afternoons were for deliveries and reading sessions. Evenings returned to the cottage, where pasta boiled over and shoes never quite made it to the rack. Sadie's books took over the living room. The girls started writing their own mini-stories and stapling them together with covers made from cereal boxes. One night, Sadie caught Lucas sitting at the kitchen table, carefully reading a 6-page saga titled "The Purple Tiger Who Lost His Roar." He looked up, eyes wide. "It's heartbreaking, but also deeply redemptive." Sadie grinned. "Ella's going through her existentialist phase." The girls started calling her Mama Sadie. It wasn't asked for. It just happened. One night, Emma said it aloud during dinner. "Pass the butter, Mama Sadie?" Everyone froze. Even the wind chime outside went still. Sadie blinked, then smiled. "Of course, sweetheart." Lucas said nothing at first, but after the girls were in bed, he found her folding laundry on the couch, her hands shaking ever so slightly. He sat beside her, gently took a sock from her hands. "You don't have to be anyone you're not," he said softly. She looked at him, eyes full. "But what if I want to be?" One Saturday evening, after a long day of reading at a downtown community center, Sadie returned to the cottage to find the porch lit with string lights. Ella and Emma met her at the door, holding out a box wrapped in brown paper and marker hearts. "For you," Ella said. Inside was a necklace made of yarn and dried pasta, one piece painted gold in the middle. "It's your official Story Nest medal," Emma explained. "You're the leader." Sadie laughed through tears. "I thought I was the book queen." "Now you're both," Ella said solemnly. "You leveled up." Lucas stood behind them, arms crossed, watching her smile stretch across the room. She looked up at him. "I don't think I've ever been this tired," she said. He stepped forward, brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "And I don't think I've ever seen you shine like this." That night, the four of them curled on the couch together, books stacked at their feet, cocoa mugs half empty on the end table. The fire crackled softly. Sadie leaned against Lucas, one arm wrapped around a sleeping Emma, the other holding Ella's hand. She looked at the family she never knew she'd have, and whispered to herself, "This is the story I never dared to dream." And now, she was living it. The name stuck. It began as a slip of the tongue, Emma's soft Mama Sadie at dinner, but within a week, it was the only name the girls used. "Mama Sadie, can you braid my hair like a storybook princess?" "Mama Sadie, what's a nebula?" "Mama Sadie, do you think birds dream?" Lucas noticed the way Sadie's breath caught each time they said it. not with fear, but with reverence, like she was holding something delicate and sacred in her hands. And maybe she was. She hadn't asked for the title, hadn't imagined it, hadn't dared to hope. But when it arrived, small and unannounced, it wrapped itself around her heart like a child's hand. And she held on. One afternoon, Lucas found her in the garden behind the cottage, sitting on a picnic blanket surrounded by library books and two giggling girls. He watched from the porch as Sadie leaned down and whispered something to Emma, who burst into a full-bellied laugh, the kind that cracked the air open like summer thunder. Lucas walked down slowly, coffee mug in hand. "They asked if they could call me that forever," Sadie said, before he even spoke. He sat beside her, the grass warm under them. "And what did you say?" She looked out over the garden. "I said names don't last forever, but love does." He studied her face, serene, tender, alive in a way she hadn't been months ago. "I think that's the most honest answer you could have given." She turned to him then. "Do you think it's okay that I let them call me that?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached forward and took her hand. "You've never just been okay, Sadie," he said quietly. "You've been exactly what they needed." But not everyone agreed. News of Lucas's semi-retirement from the tech world and his growing involvement with Story Nest had made waves. One morning, Sadie opened her email to find a message titled, "This is not your place." It was anonymous. Bitter. "You're not their mother. You're just a passing phase, a charity case dressed in secondhand clothes." She froze. The message sat on her screen like poison, its words crawling off the page and wrapping around her throat. She didn't cry. She didn't reply. She just closed the laptop and sat very still. Lucas found her on the couch that evening, staring at the cold fireplace. She handed him the laptop wordlessly. His jaw tightened as he read, fury threading through every line of his face. But when he looked up, he didn't speak anger. He spoke truth. "Do you want me to respond?" Sadie shook her head. "They'll only get louder." "Then we make something louder still," he said. And he did. 2 days later, the Story Nest van pulled into the parking lot of Jefferson Elementary School. But this time, instead of 30 kids, there were 300. The press was there too, but only because someone had sent a tip. Lucas stood behind Sadie as she opened the van's doors. The children rushed forward, not with chaos, but with joy. One by one, they hugged her. Some brought crayon cards. Some wore paper crowns that said, "Team Mama Sadie." One boy carried a shoebox with dandelions and a letter that simply read, "You make the sad days better." Lucas watched her eyes brim, but not spill. And that night, when they were back at the cottage, she printed the hateful email, folded it into a paper crane, and dropped it in the fire. The flames took it gently. One morning, while pouring cereal, Emma said, "Are we going to be official one day?" Lucas looked up, confused. "Official?" "Like, Sadie's really our mom. On paper. Not just in the heart." He blinked. "Well, that kind of thing takes time. There are laws, processes." "But can we try?" Ella chimed in. Sadie, who had just walked in holding a dish towel, paused at the doorway. She didn't speak. Lucas walked to her slowly. Kneeling, he took her hand in front of the girls. "I don't know what the papers say," he said, voice husky. "But you've been family since the moment you sat at our table by accident." Sadie looked at the girls. They weren't asking for a replacement. They were asking for permanence. A promise. And so she gave it. That fall, Lucas hosted a quiet dinner. Not for investors, not for publicity, just for the four of them. And a lawyer. Her name was Teresa. Warm, efficient, kind. She brought coloring books for the twins. Now, I'm not here to replace anyone or rewrite history, she explained gently. I'm just here to make sure what's already true is recognized. Sadie's hands trembled slightly as she signed the first document. Emma reached over and held her wrist steady. Families come in all kinds, Teresa said as she stamped the last page. Lucas smiled through misty eyes. Ours started with spaghetti and crayons. And no questions, Sadie added, her voice breaking into a laugh. The girls surprised her the next morning. They had written and illustrated a book, bound with ribbon and stickers. Title, How We Got Our Mama Sadie. On the first page, in messy but determined handwriting, it read, Once there were two girls who didn't know they were missing something, until a lady with a story voice sat at their table. Sadie didn't even try to hide her tears. She read it aloud, voice shaking, while the girls beamed beside her. When she finished, Emma whispered, Now it's official. In the weeks that followed, Sadie noticed changes she hadn't expected. Not in the girls, in herself. She no longer questioned whether she deserved joy. She no longer waited for it to vanish. She planted herbs on the windowsill, bought a sun hat. Let Lucas convince her to get new boots. She said yes, more, to ice cream at noon, to bedtime stories read by flashlight, to singing along with off-key voices in the car. She even wrote a letter to her own estranged mother, not to reopen the door, but to say, I healed anyway. On the last day of November, with the air tasting of cinnamon and frost, the family piled into the van for a literacy event at a local shelter. Sadie wore her yarn medal. Lucas wore a ridiculous reindeer sweater. The girls had matching scarves that said book bosses. As they drove, Sadie looked out the window and whispered something only the wind could hear. Thank you for the wrong reservation. Lucas caught her eye in the rearview mirror. She didn't need to explain. He already knew. The table had always been small. A second-hand find from a yard sale, its legs slightly uneven, the wood scratched from years of other people's lives. But Sadie had loved it from the moment she saw it. She'd dragged it into her tiny living room in cabin 6 and told herself, one day, someone else will sit here with me. Now the table had moved. So had she. From cabin 6 to the Westwood Estates' cozy guest house, now officially theirs. Lucas had insisted they not change too much. It needed to feel like them, not like a palace. And so the table came too, nestled beside the fireplace, where 4 chairs, mismatched and a little squeaky, surrounded it like old friends. It was, finally, a table for 4. And on Christmas morning, that table would witness something more sacred than any office deal, any tech launch, any billion-dollar signature. It would witness the quiet, full-circle miracle of chosen family. The snow fell in slow motion outside, soft as flour over the glass. Lucas had gotten up before dawn, determined to surprise the girls with a dad-made breakfast. It was mostly chaos, burnt pancakes, eggs too runny, cocoa a little bitter. But he'd plated it all with pride. Sadie came downstairs last. She paused when she saw the scene. Twin girls in Christmas pajamas, hair wild and faces glowing. Lucas in a flour-stained apron, grinning like a boy. "Don't judge the eggs," he warned. "They taste better with gratitude." Sadie laughed, kissed his cheek, and sat at her seat, her real seat. "Let's say grace," Emma said suddenly. The table quieted. Sadie expected something rehearsed, but Emma just closed her eyes and said, "Thank you for not giving up, even when we were all a little lost." There was silence, then sniffles, then arms around each other, then breakfast. Later that morning, the girls disappeared upstairs with glitter markers and construction paper. Lucas and Sadie sat by the tree, watching the fire breathe in and out. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "I think my heart used to be a rental." Lucas blinked. "What do you mean?" "It felt like it belonged to other people. My mom, the library board, the past. I was always afraid someone would come take it back." She turned to look at him. "But not anymore." Lucas kissed the top of her head. "Mine too," he whispered. At noon, the doorbell rang. Sadie opened it to find Mrs. Ellsworth, the widow from Cabin 2, holding a pie wrapped in flannel. "I heard through the pine tree grapevine that you moved up in the world," she grinned. "But I know better. You just moved closer to your real calling." Sadie hugged her. "I miss you all," she said. "I was never supposed to leave you, just the pain." Mrs. Ellsworth smiled. "Oh, honey, you brought us with you. Every story hour, every knitted hat, every bedtime hug. That doesn't go away." The pie was still warm when they placed it on the table. Around 3 p.m., Sadie stepped outside alone. The snow had stopped, but the world remained hushed. She wandered toward the old maple tree at the edge of the yard, the one where the girls had once hung paper hearts that said, "Sadie lives here now." Someone had tied a ribbon to one of its branches. Sadie touched it gently. Then she pulled a letter from her coat pocket. It had no envelope, no stamp. It was for herself. To the girl in cabin 6, you survived. You kept reading stories when no one listened. You kept setting tables even when no one came. You kept being kind even when the world was cruel. And now, look, you didn't find a fairy tale. You built one. Love, Sadie. She folded it and tucked it inside a hollow in the tree. Some truths didn't need an audience. That evening, they hosted a simple dinner. No designer gowns, no board members. Just a meal with the librarian, the CEO, and 2 girls who believed in forever. Ella, ever the organizer, insisted on hand-drawn menus. Not burnt mac and cheese. Storytime salad, because Mama Sadie told the lettuce a bedtime tale. Cocoa volcanoes, chocolate cupcakes with marshmallow lava. Lucas had printed little place cards that read, Emma the Brave, Ella the Kind, Sadie the Heart, and Dad the Goofball. They laughed until their cheeks hurt. And then, after dessert, Emma stood. "I have an announcement," she declared with a crumpled piece of paper in hand. Sadie and Lucas looked at each other, puzzled. Emma cleared her throat. "We, the undersigned, do hereby officially declare that this," she waved at the table, "is now the Forever Family table." She looked at Ella. "And if anyone wants to join us, they have to pass a test." Lucas leaned in. "What kind of test?" Ella grinned. "They have to be kind, really, really kind, like share the last cookie kind." Sadie laughed so hard she cried. Not because it was silly, but because it was true. That night, as Lucas tucked the girls in, Sadie stood by the window. The stars were sharp, the sky infinite. She thought about the lonely nights she once filled with classic novels and lukewarm tea, the hours spent wondering if she'd ever be enough, for anyone. And now... Tiny footsteps padded across the hallway. Emma appeared in her doorway. "Can I sleep with you guys tonight?" she whispered. Sadie reached out her hand. "Always." Later, curled up in bed with Lucas and Emma nestled between them like a comma in a long sentence, Sadie whispered, "Do you think this will last?" Lucas kissed her forehead. "No, I know it will." Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they'd lost and everything they'd found. Epilogue. 1 year later. At the town library, a new mural graced the children's section. It featured a tree with 4 branches, each with a name carved into it. Above it, a ribbon banner read, "The Table That Found Us." Story time was packed every Saturday. Lucas had donated an endowment for literacy programs. Sadie now directed the Regional Reading Initiative. The twins led a kindness club with rules like bring extra snacks and invite quiet kids to play. And the little table? It sat in the front lobby of the library, its chairs always full, because some stories never end. They just begin again, in the hearts of those brave enough to love.